I'm so glad you joined me today for College in Europe 101, how to get a life-changing, high-quality education without breaking the bank. A lot of families are interested in this topic due to the problems with U.S. higher education. I'm sure it's no surprise to you that college costs are out of control, that the admissions process is rigged, and that there are concerns around educational quality and outcomes. So many of us are seeking affordable higher education options that don't sacrifice quality, a transparent admissions procedure, as well as options that open up doors and opportunities in the future. The great thing is that this exists. In this class, I'm going to show you how college in Europe can solve all of these problems and also provide benefits you might not have even considered. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jen Vimont. I'm the founder of Beyond the States. I spent most of my life in Chicago, but my husband Tom and I moved our family to Chapel Hill, North Carolina back in 2002. So I started Beyond the States due to these two guys right here, my kids Sam and Ellie. As a parent of two teenagers, I had a lot of concerns about college, and I started thinking about it more and more when Sam was just in middle school. At that point, the documentary Race to Nowhere was really big, and I knew I didn't want us to get caught up in the admissions rat race, but I didn't know there was an alternative. I also knew that our college savings would not even scratch the surface of anything but in-state, and I didn't want my kids to be limited geographically. Beyond that, it seemed that everywhere I looked, I was reading about different problems with U.S. higher education, including student life issues, quality of education, the outcomes. And then, back in the spring of 2015, I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw an article about an American who was studying in Germany for free and without knowing German. So up until then, I didn't know that there were opportunities to get a full degree taught in English. I figured it was something that was just confined to study abroad for a semester. Even as I read the article, I thought, this must still be expensive when you factor in living and travel costs, especially if you're considering countries that don't offer free tuition. I was surprised I had never heard of this option, and I figured there must be some sort of a catch. So I spent several weekends sitting out on my back porch with my computer, researching and finding out how wrong I really was. I was really excited by all I was learning, but it was incredibly stressful because there are so many differences between the US and European higher education, and then there was an added challenge of figuring out the differences between the systems of the different countries within Europe. There was not one single source of information, and many of the portals were little more than paid advertising sites. So I had a ton of questions. I knew it was something I wanted to learn more about for my own kids, and I also realized that there were other families like me and maybe like you who would want to consider it for their kids as well. So in order to start Beyond the States, I spent a year researching. I was visiting schools in Europe, talking to administrators, talking to international students, so that I could provide objective first-hand information about this. Something I continue to do, not only because I love to travel, but so that I can provide families with the information that I wanted and when I was considering this option for my own kids. I don't partner with schools so that I can be totally honest about what I learn, even when it's not complimentary. In addition to families being interested, the press has been as well, and we've been featured in Bloomberg, a Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Forbes, US News, and in 2018, I wrote a book on the topic, which you can find on Amazon. It's called College Beyond the States, European Schools That Will Change Your Life Without Breaking the Bank. These options have changed my family's life in so many ways. My oldest Sam finished high school and was able to opt out of the admissions rat race. The school he's attending in Europe will cost us less for the entire degree than 1 year of a comparable program at a private U.S. university. I'll talk more about that in a bit. So I'm excited to introduce these possibilities to you today. We're going to be talking about the cost of going to college in Europe, the admissions process, and also differences in student life and the educational experience. So let's start with cost. This is the one that usually grabs people's attention first. It did mine. But what's interesting is that as people learn more and more about studying in Europe and as they go ahead and do it, it moves down as a secondary benefit compared to the others. So anyway, we all know about the high costs here. I was vaguely aware that colleges were getting more and more expensive, but I didn't know how incredibly quickly the cost was growing until I decided to check out the trend. I did a presentation at Atlanta a while back, so I pulled these numbers from this site called College Calc, and it shows this disturbing data for most US schools. So I compared the current tuition with what rates were the year that I went to college, and then what they're projected to be in just a few years. Look at that. That is the annual projected tuition for 2023, which is right around the corner and would affect many of us. So let's contrast this to tuition in Europe. There are over 1,800 English taught programs in Europe. So these are taught entirely in English. The readings are in English, the lectures are in English, the assignments are in English. All of it is in English academically. The average tuition for international students at all of these programs is $8,000 per year. Further, there are hundreds of programs that cost under $4,000 a year and 50 that are tuition free, even for international students. The savings are further increased when you factor in that most bachelor's programs take just 3 or 3.5 years to complete. In many cases, it costs less to obtain a full bachelor's degree in Europe, including travel costs, than 1 year of U.S. out-of-state or private school tuition. So this is one of my favorite images ever. The number in parentheses is the number of English taught programs in the country, and the other is the annual tuition. So before we go much further, let me explain what I mean when I keep saying program. Program basically means your major. One of the main differences between Europe and the US is that you're applying to a specific program at a school. It's like knowing your major ahead of time. All of your courses will be related to your program, major, except for your electives. The lack of gen ed requirements is one of the reasons why it takes less time to get a degree. But don't freak out about this if you or your student has no idea what to study. There are a lot of broad, multidisciplinary, and even liberal arts options. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but I did want you to know what I mean by program. It's important that we think beyond just basic tuition numbers, though. Other factors affect costs as well. For instance, some schools or countries don't offer any scholarships. Some have a really high or a really low cost of living, and there's also proof of means to consider, which is in order to get a student residence permit, you have to demonstrate that you have a certain amount of money, which varies by country based on cost of living, to live on for the year. So let's look at how some of these variables play out. Norway is one of those countries that offers free tuition at their public universities. I'm not going to lie, it's an amazing country. It's peaceful and it's also vibrant. But I'll tell you, I've traveled to a lot of expensive cities, but I was blown away at how much day-to-day things cost here. Things like public transportation and other things you might need for day-to-day life, like Band-Aids. Then we have Estonia, where the average tuition is not free, but it's still incredibly affordable. Before starting Beyond the States, I couldn't have placed Estonia on the map. But after visiting, I think the country is a hidden gem for international students. They're one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, and they're known as the next Silicon Valley. They're actually an e-society, and internet access is a defined human right. They have reasonable tuition, affordable cost of living, and it's easy to explore other parts of the world. They have a great airport. Helsinki's just a short ferry ride away. Russia's right across the way. And there are incredible opportunities to learn from them around technology and internship opportunities. There have been some students who I've done a best fit list for who've been a little skeptical when I suggested schools in Estonia. Then they looked into it and they're totally psyched, and we have a few students studying there now. That said, I know that none of them had said to themselves before that, I'd really like to study in Estonia. So even though there's tuition in Estonia and not in Norway, a student will pay $2,358 less per year in Estonia. And there are opportunities for further saving through scholarships, which aren't available at public universities in Norway. So as I mentioned before, my son is attending Leiden University. At $12,250 a year, it's on the higher side of the tuition range in Europe. The program at Leiden takes 3 years to complete, which will be a total of $36,750 in tuition costs. If Sam were to go to a school in the United States, Vermont's Middlebury College would likely be a good fit for his academic interests. Yet tuition for 1 year is $52,080, which is $15,000 more than the full 3-year program at Leiden. Let's pretend that room and board is a wash, though it's not. We'll pay less than $850 for a private room and food costs as opposed to the $1,500 per month we'd pay for a shared room and board at Middlebury. And let's not even factor in the fact that there would be travel costs for us from North Carolina to Vermont. We could theoretically fly him business class, though we won't, for the 3 years and still pay less for the entire cost than a year at Middlebury. Overall, our savings will be more than $171,000. Who wouldn't want to save $171,000? So let's move on to admissions, because this is an area that has affected our lives as much as the $171,000 in savings. Actually, maybe not as much, but pretty close. I recently read that college admissions counselors spend less than 8 minutes on each application. They have so many qualified applicants, they have to look for reasons not to admit an applicant. It might be that there aren't enough AP scores, or the class ranking isn't high enough, or that they had mediocre SAT scores, or not enough extracurricular activities, or not enough leadership roles, or summers that lack sufficient enrichment. It's a fine line, though, because too many extracurricular activities might indicate that the applicant lacks focus. Yet too many activities with a similar focus could make them look like they don't have a diversity of interests. There's just no way to win, and the reason not to admit an applicant goes on and often contradicts the other. I also recently read that colleges are taking completely subjective assessments of personality, like likability, into consideration. The competition's not just at the Ivy Leagues either. Many lesser-known colleges have crazy low admission rates. The stress involved with this process is linked to the increase in anxiety among American teenagers, and it's creating a national mental health crisis. Let's contrast this with the European admissions process. The first thing to recognize is that in Europe, schools don't use admissions rates as an indicator of educational quality or prestige. The reputation of the school is not generally linked to how selective it is. At many schools, the admissions process is less competitive, even at highly ranked reputable ones. Each school has their own set of admissions requirements, and if you meet those requirements and there's room in the program, then you're admitted. The admissions criteria might be a certain ACT or SAT score, a set GPA, a defined number of AP courses, or even as little as a high school diploma. A number of very reputable European universities have programs without enrollment caps, so students who meet their criteria, their defined criteria, are accepted, period. It doesn't matter if they have a higher GPA than the one required, or if they have more AP courses than those required. They aren't being compared to the other applicants. They're being assessed to see if they have the qualifications that are defined as needed to succeed in the program. Students then have the first year as a student to prove that they're able to succeed. Is that refreshing or what? One of the first things a school wants to know is whether the high school education the applicant received is the equivalent to the one that they would get in that country. So the requirements vary from country to country and school to school. For instance, in Italy, Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark, and some schools in Switzerland, students with a U.S. high school diploma must also have at least 3 or 4, depending on the country, AP courses with scores of at least 3. Other schools across the EU may or may not require AP classes or test scores for U.S. students, depending on the school and program. Good news, if you have an IB diploma, you get to bypass all these extra requirements, as an IB diploma provides automatic equivalency. 1 year of college credits can also substitute for the AP requirements as well. I sometimes meet people who say that they're interested in going to school in Europe, but think they can't because they don't have AP classes. This is not the case. It's true that you couldn't go in, say, Denmark without the APs, but the majority of Europe is still open to you. The programs that have these extra requirements are actually in the minority. So Sam would not be a good player of the admissions game in the U.S. Many of his interests just wouldn't translate onto an application. He works out, but he's not into sports. He's never been interested in joining any clubs, but he tends to find an interest or hobby and pursue it on his own or with his friends. All of this is totally fine for college in Europe. Sam applied to one of the programs that doesn't have an enrollment cap. Again, this means that if he has the qualifications that are defined, then he's in, period. The school required a 3.5 GPA and 3 AP scores of 4 or higher. He didn't have to pad his application with activities that meant little to him. He didn't have to take an abundance of AP courses. He was able to pursue academic interests outside of school, like teaching himself languages. He had an after-school job, which taught him a tremendous amount, and he had a fairly balanced life. How cool is that? So there are also some key differences around the educational experience and student life that are important to know. I'm often asked whether the degree from Europe will be good here in the US. Every school and program you find listed in the Beyond the States database is accredited, and the degree is internationally recognized. It'll provide the qualifications needed for master's degree studies as well. The other thing to note is that we live in a globalized world now, so employers and graduate schools are accustomed to seeing degrees from other countries. But let's get into educational quality a little bit more and our own beliefs around it. Many people from the US and elsewhere believe that the US offers the highest quality education in the world. But this recent study found that US students with a 4-year bachelor's degree scored below their counterparts in 19 of 21 participating countries. And it gets worse. They found that these same US bachelor's degree holders scored the same as those who only had a high school education in 3 of the top performing countries. Yet so many of us continue to believe that the US higher education system is the best. A lot of this is due to rankings, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about why you shouldn't worry about rankings when you're looking at college in Europe. The main reason is that global rankings, as opposed to the national rankings, which have their own set of problems, are based 100% on research-related criteria. This disqualifies a lot of schools from the rankings, specialized schools, small schools, schools that focus on applied knowledge rather than research. Like anywhere, there are really incredible and reputable schools, good schools, and mediocre schools. You just can't use rankings as a way to determine this. So I mentioned before that there are many full degree programs that are just 3 years in duration. A lot of that is because there aren't the non-major related gen ed requirements that we have here. A student in a chemistry program, for instance, won't be required to take Philosophy 101, though they'll have the opportunity to explore non-chemistry related areas through their electives or through study abroad. What this means is that when you apply in Europe, you're applying to a specific program at that university. Each department usually has its own admissions staff. It's basically like declaring your major ahead of time. So some people worry that having to choose a program is going to restrict their learning or be too focused. This doesn't have to be the case, though. There are many programs that are interdisciplinary, combining different areas of study in meaningful ways instead of teaching them in a silo like traditional majors and minors. My son's program, International Studies, is an example of a program that's multidisciplinary. In the first year, students study economics, history, culture, and politics, and they start specializing on a region and a language that they select out of 8 choices for region and 22 corresponding languages. And then they look at those same subjects with the focus of that region. And of course, it includes intensive language learning as well. So it's a broad and diverse education with a focus. Other examples include a large number of international business programs that include a focus on the culture of a certain region and the language. There are PPE programs, it's philosophy, politics, and economics. Those are very popular. There are developmental studies that combine sociology, political science, human geography, economics, and history. And of course, there are some programs that are broad, like a broad social science program, a humanities program, a business program, and such. Many of these have students choose a specialization the second year, which is similar to declaring a major. There are also some liberal arts options which allow students to choose their major from a much larger selection after the first year. So let's go back to the question about whether the degree is good here. We've talked about how the degree is recognized internationally, but often this question pertains to the impact on employability. Good news is it actually helps your employability. This study found that studying abroad for longer periods of time had a high impact on job offers and career advancement. So why is this the case? There are a couple reasons. The first is around internships, which are often a required part of a program. This isn't like, hey, it's summer, go find an internship. There's usually a semester set aside for it, And the internships are related to the field of study as opposed to, schlepping coffee. Internships not only provide this great hands-on experience, but they're also a direct line to employment, since employers tend to hire about 50% of the interns who work for them, and in some fields it's closer to 75%. Even if the internship occurs in Europe, it can lead to these opportunities in the US or elsewhere in the world, since many multinational companies work with European universities. Of course, what I think are even cooler are the Europe-specific opportunities. I mean, just think about these. The World Health Organization, the UN Regional Center, the Center for Counterterrorism. They're just these incredible opportunities. Another factor that helps with employability pertains to soft skills. Employers are actually finding these are lacking in US graduates. When you live outside your country, you're going to gain an awareness and appreciation for cultural differences. The emphasis on group work in Europe gives students the experience working with people with different backgrounds and different perspectives. When you live outside of your home country, you learn to be flexible, adaptable. You have experiences in navigating unfamiliar circumstances. And these are all skills that are needed in the workplace, and employers know that. So I do want to touch down on a few things about student life. 3 big differences I want to talk about here. Housing, 90% of the time, is not owned by the school. There are private student residence providers throughout the city, like dorms, where schools may or may not reserve rooms for their students. The nice thing is that since it's private, it provides market competition, and the rooms are more reasonable than room and board in the US. There's also a nice mix of privacy and community, as students generally have a private bedroom and then a bathroom and common area that's a kitchen and living area that's shared with just a few students, usually between 2 and 6. Meal plans aren't a thing, so that kitchen is actually used with meals becoming really social and multicultural events. Not only do you have students from all over the world living in the residences, student residences will usually house students from different schools throughout the city. This is one reason that student life is often more connected to the city than to the school. There will be opportunities for student clubs and associations through the school, but many more options at a city level. And this is really unique. I mean, I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where UNC and Duke University are within 15 minutes of each other, but you will not find students at the same parties or at the same bars or in the same dorms. I actually just recently drove past a sandwich place near UNC, and the awning said, "Duke sucks." And this wasn't graffiti, this was part of their marketing. So sports is like this too. You may participate at an intramural level through your school, but students from different schools cheer for the same regional and national teams. Finally, the connection to others is really significant. The English taught programs exist to draw students from around the world. Think about how few international students a place like Latvia would have if all of their programs were in Latvian. So because of the international student body, you're going to have friends from all around the world. The cultural differences between a student from Atlanta, Georgia, and one from Tbilisi, Georgia, are glaring. These cultural differences are recognized, they're openly discussed, and they're valued. Though there are differences in background, there are meaningful common experiences and values among international students. They're all experiencing living outside of their home country, which is a significant and life-changing experience. Further, most of these students do have the values associated with global citizenship, which connects them on a really deep level. If you've watched the webinar to this point, odds are you're someone who doesn't make decisions based on group norms. One quality I believe is true of all of our members is that they don't feel the need to accept the status quo. They seek alternatives to what they see as problems, even if it goes against group norms. Like our members, I'm not someone who could be described as going with the flow. I need to see where the flow is going and determine whether or not it's aligned with my values and goals before I go with it. Going back to the shared values and goals, our members do value education, but not the often meaningless work that's involved in winning at the U.S. admissions game. These families have values related to global citizenship. They want their children to identify as a member of the world community and provide experiences and education with that end in sight. They realize that international experiences are a part of global citizenship and cultivate independence in their children so that they can find success even if they're temporarily far away from home. Does this sound like you? If so, You may be as excited about these options as I am. It can be hard to know where to start though. Yep, you can do the research yourself, but I'll warn you that it took me a full year of pretty much doing this full time to have a good grasp on everything. I've talked to parents who spent months researching, still being confused, and so glad to have found all this research was done for them. So I want to tell you about the different ways to access our information and our community. First thing is that Beyond the States membership comes with database access. And the database is constantly updated. We don't do any data scraping. We check the accreditation and provide all of this information and more for you through our database. Beyond the States membership also provides access to me. You get your questions answered by me in our monthly office hours. I make a recording of all of the questions that are submitted to me. We also have quarterly member Q&A calls, so you can get answers to your questions as well as the questions that other people have that you might not have thought of yet. And I'll tell you that the information you can learn from other members is incredible. In addition to the interactions on the Q&A calls, we have a private member Facebook group, and it's a really active and supportive group. People are at all different stages of the process, sharing valuable knowledge and support. I've also created resources that are going to help guide you through the process. The membership portal contains webinars with information about things like student life, housing, a basic overview, and then you have courses. And these give you a deep dive into a topic with action steps to complete to reach an end goal. Course topics include how to choose a university, how to tackle the admissions process, including writing a motivational letter, how to choose an area of study. There's a specific country course, and I'm working on an after you get in course as well. Last but not least is the program of the month. I research and provide information on a specific program that you might not otherwise have been aware of. I recently wrote up a program on esports management, which, by the way, I had to Google first to understand what exactly esports are. But I was super impressed on how diverse the program was, from law to marketing to business management to coaching, all of these topics, but in a way that relate to esports, which, by the way, is a billion-dollar industry. Who knew? So a Beyond the States membership contains all of these benefits for $49 a month. There's no minimum commitment. You can cancel at any time with 7 days notice. It's easy to cancel. There's a little form to fill out in the membership portal, and then you're done. I also respect that there's not a one-size-fits-all for everyone. So I've put together a number of add-ons to help people at different points in the process. The best fit list is something I highly recommend. Not only do I think it's incredibly valuable, but I love doing them. What happens is students send me a completed questionnaire, and then I develop a detailed short list of specific programs and schools that I think they should check out. The list is totally personalized and based on their personality, their preferences, their interests, their skills, their budgets, and qualifications. The What's My Major list is sort of a step before the best fit list for students who have no idea what they want to study. Again, they send me information and I come up with types of study areas that fit their interests and skills and provide ways for them to check out more. I also offer consultations that can help figuring out a timeline, writing a motivational letter, or any part of the process really. I'm so glad you stuck around for the webinar, and I hope you're super excited about the possibilities. I'd like to offer you a limited time discount of $100 off the best fit list. This is good for 72 hours though. You can complete the list much later. You don't have to do it now. After you purchase it, you can do it months later if you like. And this discount can be accessed through the button you see here on the page. I hope you enjoyed learning about these incredible opportunities, and I hope to work with you in the future.